Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, John Michael McGrath and yours truly bring you a special episode of On Poly, focusing on the role Ontario played in the results of Canada's 2025 federal election. Then, the funny minds behind the Beaverton on satire in troubling times. And comedian and actor Dave Thomas joins us to talk about his upcoming visit to Ukraine. That's all ahead on the agenda. Hey, partner, little sugar?
Oh, sir.
How late did you stay up last night?
I think I was in bed by 1:30.
1:30?
Yes.
Wimp.
Yeah, I was up at 5:30, if that helps.
Okay, that's not bad. I think we might have got around the same amount of sleep. I think I went to bed about 3:30. Up doing radio, though, by about 7. So it was, anyway, it was a short night. In terms of our fashion choices today, which we always talk about off the top, my shirt says one word and one word only on it, and that word is Ontario. It's a nice picture of a canoe here because... I'm starting to think about that, but we want to talk Ontario today and the role that this big province played in the outcome of last night's really quite extraordinary election. And what are you doing? Are you joining the resistance?
Well, you know, I wore this, I think, just before the writ dropped, or maybe like just at the beginning.
Before the writ what?
Before the writ was...
Did you just say what I thought you just said? You said dropped.
I am underslept.
Just when I think we're making progress and you say the writ dropped. Anyway, all right. Moving along here. Let's...
Yes, so... not enough caffeine in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, given that we have now ended the federal election and we have to go back to remembering that, oh yes, Donald Trump still lives and governs to the south of us, I thought I would wear the shirt again to remind people.
A good reminder.
Yes.
And with that, meet me on camera 2, Sheldon, where I say, off to issue 1. 3 months ago, the Conservative Party of Canada had a 25-point lead on the Liberals and Justin Trudeau. But then came Donald Trump and Mark Carney, and suddenly the entire dynamic of the Canadian political scene changed. We saw the outcome of those changes last night. The Liberals retain power with a minority government as we speak at this moment. Liberals, 168 seats on the strength of 43.5% of the total vote. Conservatives, 144 seats on the strength of 41.4% of the total vote. And how fascinating is that? Stephen Harper won a majority government in 2011 with 39.5%. Pierre Poilievre does better than that, 41.7%, and he comes second. The Bloc Québécois is the third place party. They get 23 seats with 6.4% of the vote. The New Democrats, 7 seats, a drubbing, with only 5% of the total vote. The Greens got 1 seat. That was Elizabeth May's on 1.2% of the total vote. JMM, it was a tight election.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the story of last night is just a massive consolidation of the vote in the Liberal and Conservative parties. To take just one part of this story, Pierre Poilievre led the Conservative Party to its highest share of the popular vote since 1988. Wow. I was 7. Still came in second. A more on Poly-focused angle here. Coming in second, Poilievre and the Conservatives have so far, as we are counting, earned 1.1 million more votes from Ontario in this federal election than Doug Ford won in the provincial election earlier this year. Now, it was a higher turnout election. It was 67%, I believe, from Elections Canada. So obviously those numbers were going to be larger. But I do want to stress that, like, turnout is just a result of choices that politicians and voters make. It's not dictated. Poilievre motivated 1.1 million more people to come out and vote for him in this federal election. That's not accidental, and it's not something you can sort of wave away. I think that's going to be part of a story that we talk about a bit more in months to come. Just again, noting for our listeners that as we are reading off some of these numbers, they are subject to change. Elections Canada has restarted the count, and it's possible some of these numbers might change slightly, but at this point, we're not expecting major changes in the seat count.
One of the things I thought we would anticipate is a higher overall vote count, in other words, a higher turnout. What do we get, 67% or something like that?
67%, yeah.
Okay, I think the all-time turnout was 1958 with the Diefenbaker sweep, and it was up around 70, I forget now, 6, 7, 8, something like that. I thought we'd get a higher vote count this time just because there was so much at stake. We did, however. The early polls, those were big numbers, right?
Right. We got 7.3 million people voted early this election. So something like a quarter of the total turnout was early vote. That is a substantial increase from the 2021 election, which saw about 5.8 million people vote early. There's a big question about whether early voting preferentially benefits one party or the other. I'm not sure that we have real evidence there. It's not clear to me that early voting actually induces more people to vote overall than would otherwise. Maybe it's just people who would have voted anyway, just find a more convenient time to do it. Nevertheless, 7.3 million people early voting, it certainly mattered in terms of the way that the votes were counted and registered last night.
Indeed. And let's stress this point again. We're going to give you some more numbers now on what the province of Ontario did last night. But, of course, they are still counting, so these numbers are subject to change. We are the On Poly podcast, so we are going to put what this province's voters did under the microscope right now. 122 seats in the province of Ontario, and here is what you did with your votes last night. The Liberals were the number one party in the province, 69 seats on the strength of, if you can imagine, almost 49% of the total vote in the province. But the Conservatives not far behind, 53 seats, thanks to 44% of the vote. New Democrats, 0 seats in the province of Ontario. They had 5, they lost them all, because they got less than 5% of the total vote. What is fascinating is that only 2 months ago, we just had a provincial election 2 months ago, these same voters gave Doug Ford's Conservatives 80 seats. They gave Pierre Poilievre 53. They gave Marat Stiles' NDP 27 seats. They gave Jagmeet Singh 0. They gave Bonnie Crombie's Liberals 14 seats. They gave Mark Carney's Liberals 69.
And if I could add one more, they gave the Green Party 2 seats, Mike Schreiner and National Clancy. The Green Party had 1 seat prior to this election. They have lost that one as well.
Indeed. I hear a lot from political candidates all the time that when they go knocking on doors, voters do not distinguish between, federal Liberals and provincial Liberals, or, the federal parties and the provincial parties. Well, clearly they do when they want to, because they've delivered within a very short space of time 2 dramatically different sets of results. Federal party, provincial party, no difference? Not true. Big differences in these 2 elections. Now, there were some other unusual developments as well. As we indicated, the NDP lost all their seats in Ontario, but most interestingly, they're not losing votes to Liberals, they're losing votes to Conservatives. This is, I have to say, a bit of a slap in the face to those who believe in the whole strategic voting thing, who say that the presence of the NDP takes away votes from, quote unquote, the progressive parties, as in the Liberals. Maybe not. The NDP vote disappeared, but in so many ridings, it went to Conservative candidates. So those are not progressive voters who are obviously moving to the Conservatives. They are, if I can call them this, get ready with the bleep switch there, these are screw you voters. These are blue-collar voters looking out for the little guy, ticked off at the man type of voters. Yeah. And once the NDP loses them, you wonder what they got left.
This is something we've seen now. I could go back to the 2010 election in Toronto for when Rob Ford won as mayor. He won in a lot of places that had actually voted NDP historically in the city, including what was then my own ward. And we've seen that style of politics continue to grow in strength to the point where it's now, frankly, part of the national arena. It's just as you say, a screw you vote among people who are not do not see the world through like an ideological prism of like left versus right policy prescriptions. They are looking at basically who is on their side and maybe who's going to hurt the people they want to see hurt.
Bingo. Now, you and I come from the school of thought, which is that pretty much every riding has a story to tell, and so some ridings had some very fascinating stories last night. So we're going to go through a handful of ridings right now and just talk about those stories. Why don't you start us off? Yeah,
let's go through some of the big ones. I mean, I think the big question for me was going to be, would Mark Carney win his seat in Nepean? It will be his first election.
Yeah.
He has never held elected office before. He won Nepean quite handily. 60% of the vote looks like. Next door, however, Carleton, Pierre Poilievre's riding, Poilievre did not carry his seat. I don't think this is like fatal to his future political ambitions. They will find a conservative MP to suddenly discover an urgent need to spend more time with their family, and Poilievre will be back in the Commons, I'm sure.
Just make that point. Pierre Poilievre cannot lead the conservative forces in the House of Commons during question period, which he may be one of the best at ever. Because he doesn't have a seat right now.
Yep, and also, like, one thing that I'm sure people are going to do some calculations about is that Pierre Poilievre does not control the timing of a by-election if a Conservative MP resigns. So that will be another issue. Toronto St. Paul's, we talked about that. That was a big riding when the Liberals lost it in a by-election last year. That arguably like maybe started the snowball rolling that culminated in Justin Trudeau resigning. Real crisis for the Liberal Party when they lost it. But to Canadian Liberals everywhere, a sense of order to the universe has been restored. They won Toronto St. Paul's. Leslie Church will be the MP for that riding. Burlington, bellwether riding, one that tends to vote with the party that forms government. Also the riding of Karina Gould, who ran in the leadership race against Mark Carney. She won her riding handily. But it's worth mentioning that the Liberals did not perform as well in the broader GTHA as they might have wanted, as some of the polls indicated they would, and that's why we're looking at a minority and not a majority that they might have otherwise...
At the moment.
That they might otherwise have hoped for. And then we're going to talk about that a bit later, but I was also keeping an eye on the... 3 ridings where provincial New Democrats ran federally. It did not go well for them.
No, they all not only lost, they all came third.
Yeah, big blowout numbers.
This does show you that even if you have some personal popularity, as these 3 former New Democrat MPPs had, you know, when there are bigger trends happening and an unpopular leader and an unpopular party, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I mean, not to belabor the point here, but I think of somebody like Joel Harden in Ottawa Centre, a man who had, made his name and his relationship with that riding in large part because of how he supported the community during the convoy protests. As you say, like now 3rd place. I mean, that is a tough loss.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take a look at a handful of ridings as well here, and I'm going to start with the riding just north of us here in the studio, which is Eglinton Lawrence. Vince Gasparo against Karen Stintz. This is a guy, Vince Gasparo, who ran for the provincial Liberals just a couple of months ago and lost by just, it was 167 votes, something like that. As of this moment, he is leading there. Still too close to call. They haven't called that one yet. Broadcasters. How did broadcasters do? Well, a bit of a mixed record there. In Toronto Centre, the former journalist Evan Solomon won. But in Ajax, the former 640 Toronto radio announcer Greg Brady lost to one of Toronto's deputy mayors, Jennifer McKelvey. In Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas. This is the granddaughter of the former Lieutenant Governor Lincoln Alexander. Her name is Erica Alexander. She lost for the Conservatives in a seat that many people in the Hamilton area thought the Conservatives ought to pick up. In York Centre, Roman Baber was booted out of the Ontario PC caucus. You may remember he ran afoul of Doug Ford and the Premier's office staffers. He decided to leave, go independent, then left altogether and went federal. And what does he do? He knocks off a sitting cabinet minister in that riding in Yarra Sachs. Kitchener Centre, you mentioned, the only Green seat in Ontario, one of only 2 in the country, and Mike Morris lost it for the Greens last night. Hamilton Centre, what a shocker. As strong an NDP seat as anywhere in the province of Ontario, and the NDP's Matthew Green, long-serving MP there, lost his seat ended up being, the Conservatives actually led in that seat for a part of the night, but the Liberals ultimately took it. Yeah. An inner-city Hamilton seat, the NDP loses it. Another one, Brian Massey in Windsor. I mean, the guy's been the MP there for 23 years. But as we say, when the tide goes out, it takes a lot of good people with it. Brian Massey is one of those good people. He lost his Windsor seat. Again, the surprising takeaway last night, the NDP vote collapsed but didn't go Liberal. It went Conservative. And a lot of Liberals in Ontario didn't win seats because the NDP vote went to the Conservatives in places like the 905, Cambridge, Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore. In Northern Ontario, can you imagine that? The Conservatives won seats in Northern Ontario, Sudbury, East, Manitoulin, Nickel Belt. I mean, that should be an NDP seat. It went Conservative. Not Carleton, strangely enough. How do you win so big in so much of Ontario, and how does the leader, Pierre Poilievre, lose his own seat in Carleton? I don't get it. This is one of those, we talked after the Ontario election about how there were certain anomalies, Liberals winning seats in the middle of a sea of Tory blue. A lot of that happened last night too, where things just sort of, in many cases, did not unfold as we had expected.
Just talking about the places where the Tories won, it does remind me of the patterns that we have seen with the Tories under Doug Ford, where they have won in areas of the province that are more traditionally NDP, right? The Tories have won seats in Windsor. They've won seats in Northern Ontario. And so as much as there is currently a dispute between different parts of the Conservative movement, like the broad trends don't look that different. But we can talk a bit more about that later. We did see, it looks like, a tightening of the polls over the last week. This is another reason why that early vote...
Last weekend, actually.
Yeah. And this is another reason why that early vote is so important for these results, right? The Liberals seem to have banked a lot of support, a week or so ago, when they, instead of being, within 3 points of the Tories, they were more like 5 to 7 points ahead of the Tories, depending on which polls you liked, right? Maybe a whole bunch of people who had voted early might have changed their minds if they'd had the opportunity to. We don't know, but the Liberals have to be really happy with the way those early votes turned out. We also seemed to, we've talked about this, we saw plenty of ridings where even if the NDP vote didn't sort of mechanically go to the Tories, we've definitely seen places where the NDP vote fell, but it didn't benefit the Liberals enough to push them over the top. So, yeah, very, very interesting set of results that I'm sure others, frankly, more... A, more caffeinated, and B, more data-oriented will be pouring over this morning.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the speeches in just a second, but I just have to, before we do that, mention the fact that perhaps the most interesting oration last night did not come in a leader speech, but came in a post-election results scrum that I think the CBC's David Common did with Jamil Javani, who's one of the candidates out in Durham Region for the Conservatives. He held his seat as a member of Parliament there. Jamil Javani went medieval on the Premier's office. He called Doug Ford supporters in his office a bunch of goons. He told the Premier that he should have kept his nose out of federal party business. There's no doubt in my mind, I'm prepared to be told I'm wrong about this, but there's no doubt in my mind that the absolute enmity, I was going to say antipathy, but it's stronger than that, the enmity between Pierre Poilievre's leader's office and Doug Ford's leader's office, both ostensibly Conservatives, the deterioration of that relationship dramatically affected the Conservative Party of Canada's ability to do better in Ontario last night. They did fairly well, but not well enough. And that screed by Javani on Ford and his minions may be the most memorable speech that was given last night.
You've just spoken to your supporters, a large group that's here at the pub here in Bowmanville, North Oshawa, and you said to them, among other things, that Doug Ford was a problem for you in this campaign. You said that he sabotaged the Conservative campaign. That's your words. You said he was a hype man for the Liberals. Take me through how you see that.
When it was our turn to run an election, he couldn't stay out of our business, always getting his criticisms and all his opinions out, distracting our campaign, trying to make it about him, trying to position himself as some kind of political genius that we needed to be taking cues from.
Okay, then. Let's talk speeches.
Yes.
I know it's very easy to sort of punch down on people when they're at their worst moment, so I'm not going to do that.
Yes.
I want to point out that Jagmeet Singh had a hard time getting through his speech last night because he had just led the New Democrats to one of their worst showings ever, and he had a hard time keeping it together, and that is completely understandable. He lost his own seat.
Yeah.
2 leaders lost their seats in this election. That has happened before. Michael Ignatieff, Gilles Duceppe, 2011.
Right.
Okay, so that's Jagmeet Singh. Pierre Poilievre. I know there are a lot of people in this province and country who can't stand Pierre Poilievre.
Yes.
But he had a hard job last night. He had to go out to the microphones and he had to acknowledge that he was a guy who blew a big lead and lost his own seat, and he had to do it with a smile on his face while giving an indication to his troops that he was not intending to resign. He wants to continue to fight. He said, victory will come, but it'll take time, clearly planting his flag on the notion that I intend to stick around, have somebody resign, call a by-election, get back into the House, and lead the Conservative Party into whatever goes forward. Maybe others will have a different view about that, but clearly that was his intention. And those speeches, I can tell you, because I've seen a few of them in my day, those speeches are very hard to give, and both leaders kept it together. I will be mildly critical here. I thought Mark Carney gave a fine speech last night. It was classy. He congratulated everybody for running. He congratulated his leadership opponents on their performances. I'm not sure who thought it was a good idea to give the long version of the victory speech at 2:30 in the morning. Like, honest to goodness, that speech should have been a lot shorter.
Right.
It had its funny moments. It had its touching moments. It had its strong moments. I mean, Mark Carney has really developed as a speaker. But holy smokes, folks, 2:30 in the morning, give the short version, Anyway, that's my little pet peeve about that one. How about you?
Regarding Pierre Poilievre's speech and him saying, he will stay on as leader. Of course, this is not entirely up to him,
Correct.
right? There will be some move afoot. That there are people critical of Poilievre within the Conservative Party. I don't get the sense at this point that they are a majority. I don't think that there's that much power behind any move to unseat him. Nothing like what we saw after Aaron O'Toole lost the election.
There's no Pierre Poilievre out there nipping at the heels of Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I do think that there are some people, primarily I will say on the progressive side of Ontario politics, who I think are nursing this idea that Doug Ford is going to challenge Poilievre for the leadership of the Conservative Party. And I would just go back to that 1.1 million more votes that Poilievre won last night than Doug Ford did earlier this year. If Ford or the people around Ford want to start a fight for a battle for the soul of Conservative leadership in this country, it's not clear to me this morning that Doug Ford would win that fight.
Right.
So I think Poilievre's speech was interesting. I think we will see the other thing that, at the risk of maybe I'm reading too much into something that maybe wasn't even there, was a relatively soft speech. It was magnanimous to some of the parties, and that was not, frankly, a tone that we saw a ton of from Pierre Poilievre through the election campaign. And I do wonder if they are, Poilievre and the people around him are thinking that the hard reset they need to do to convince voters that he is, frankly, not as scary, for lack of a better word. Whether they are starting that hard reset now, I guess we will find out in the days to come if he keeps a softer, more magnanimous tone, or whether he keeps his elbows up, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Okay, let me do one more thing here, and that is, it can sometimes get lost in all the analysis of numbers and ridings and strategy and politics and this and that. One significant overarching thing can get obscured, and that is, we need to talk about what an extraordinary moment this is for Mark Carney and the Liberals.
Yeah.
Mark Carney, as his wife indicated last night, when they were first courting, decades ago, he did say, when they were in England together at school, he did say to her, I do intend to go back to Canada and work in public service.
Yeah.
And that was part of the deal if they were going to be together as a couple. I remember when I met Mark Carney for the first time, it was probably 15 years ago, and at that time he was not making any secret of the fact that he wanted someday to get into politics, likely as a Liberal, and he was just sort of waiting for the right moment. Despite lots of attempts to get him to sort of jump into politics sooner than later, he held off, he held off, he held off, and he demonstrated a kind of political acumen that was pretty smart for a rookie politician. I mean, he picked the moment in history when his skill set met the moment. He may be a rookie politician, but his political instincts were pretty good there, or if they weren't his, he certainly took good advice from people who gave him that advice. So you got to hand it to him. Success in politics is about good talent, meeting good timing, and good luck. And Carney hit the trifecta on that last night, which is the reason why he's still prime minister today.
And I have to add, everything's going to get harder now, right? He has not had to face a House of Commons. He has not had to manage a Commons caucus in the midst of like having to pass a legislative agenda. He has not had to deal really extensively with 13 premiers, all of whom have their own agendas and have their own policy demands. Always better to win an election than to lose it, but it would be very interesting to see, again, meaning no disrespect, but he's never held elected office before, and these are jobs that you get better at by doing them. And he is a rookie politician tossed into what is the most difficult job in Canada, and I think we can sort of... in a sense of goodwill to all elected leaders, we can wish him good luck and say he might need it.
Give the email address, my friend, and let's get out of here.
Yes, absolutely. Once again, if you'd like to ask about any content on the show, please email us at onpolitics@tvo.org.
That is the On Poly podcast for this Tuesday, April 29th, 2025.
You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so that you get notified each time a new episode is available, and you can see the video version of the podcast on the TVO Today YouTube channel.
We are back in your inboxes and on television this Friday. So until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For 15 years, the satirical news outlet The Beaverton has been skewering Canadian politics and culture, amassing a loyal following. How does the country's most trusted, least accurate news source manage to find the humor in grim times? And what serious lessons can we learn from comedy? Joining us to discuss are co-founder and editor-in-chief Luke Gordon-Field and contributing writer Claire Blackwood. It's great to have you two here.
Thank you so much.
Thrilled to be here.
Okay, Luke, let's get into it. 15th anniversary now, right?
Yeah.
15. So how did this thing get started in the first place?
Oh, well, it got started with a brilliant guy named Laurent Noonan, who's unfortunately no longer with us, who decided Canada needed this, and that there was, so much great satire happening in this country, but nothing like what The Onion was doing in the United States, and that kind of like biting, take no prisoners approach would work well here, despite our polite sensibilities. And there was a lot of doubt at first, and basically he started with no money, no anything, and he just started dressing up in a beaver tuxedo and walking around Toronto, handing out hard copies of our paper like a full lunatic, and somehow the thing caught on, and we're here 15 years later, and I'm old.
Excuse me, how old are you exactly?
I'm 38. I'm about to be 39.
You're about to be 39,
Yeah.
and you think that's old.
I mean...
That's interesting. I've got socks older than you, okay?
Never the youngest person at the table. How nice.
But you are today.
I am today. How
Wow,
lovely.
okay. Was there an inspiration for this thing when he started it?
Yeah, I think it was just really wanting to see the kind of satire that he and I, because I joined just a few months later, he and I grew up loving. And as great as some of the Canadian examples were, like Air Farce 22, et cetera, we hadn't seen some of the kind of approach that The Daily Show and The Onion were doing in the United States. And so we thought, why not try it here? We were in the comedy scene in Toronto. It was a bunch of, just idiots trying to make each other laugh at first. We met at a pub behind Honest Ed's that gave us 10% off chicken wings, which is a very old sentence because I said Honest Ed's and existing. So, it was just really an excuse for all of us to get together and try and make each other laugh with the, kind of outlandish dream that maybe someone other than our friends and family would one day read the thing. A few thousand articles later, here we are.
There we are, 15 years later. How did you get attached to this?
I got attached because I'd loved the Beaverton for a while, and a friend of mine saw the show. Well, he's now a friend of mine, and he complimented my show, and I said, hey, I know you write for the Beaverton. how do I get in? How do I get my foot in the door there? And he kindly offered to help. He's like, give me some headlines. I will pitch them to my editors at my pitch meeting. And he did, and they liked them. And I came in for a meeting, and then the rest is history.
What do you like about it?
Okay. I like yelling at politicians for money. I think that's the simplest answer. I like making jokes. I like making people laugh. Nothing makes me happier than when somebody post an article I've written and I'm like, hey, this made my day. I was having a really bad day. This made me laugh. Thank you very much. And I like skewering people in power who really can't say anything about it.
Deep down, do you love and respect them actually?
That's a fun question. Some of them. I think I can lovingly skewer people, and then I can skewer people with hatred and jokes.
Name names. Who's in the love category? Who's in the hate category?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's just say Pierre lost his riding last night, and I am thrilled.
Rough room. Harsh. How about you? Do you love at the end of the day, do you love and respect them?
No, I don't love and respect any of them. I mean, to love a politician is asking to be heard and let down. It's like loving a rock star or a celebrity. And we're like, I can't believe Dave Grohl did that. Yeah, you can. He's a rock star. He's going to do what he did. And politicians are the same. They're always going to let you down. To love and adore them is, I think, a fool's errand. The goal should be you can respect them, but you should always try and hold them to account. And comedy can be one very silly way to do that, and that's the approach I take. So I can't think of any politician I love.
Just to let you know, I'm a Sinatra guy, okay? Mm-hmm. And you just dropped Dave Grohl's name. And I know there are lots of people that think Paikin has no idea who that is. And they may be right. So I'm going to get, is this Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl?
Yes, that is who it is.
Okay, yeah. I passed the test there.
You did great. And if you know the story I was referring to, we don't need to talk about it.
Okay, that's pushing it. I don't know the story. Generally speaking, Claire, what makes for a good target for your satire?
In my opinion, it's who's in power. Who has control over somebody else? That's the art of punching up versus punching down, right? And so you want to punch down on the people who deserve it, and generally those people are those trying to punch down on the most vulnerable, essentially.
So you want to punch up, actually?
Yeah. Well, I want to.
You want to punch at people who are powerful, who are above the rest of us.
Well, yeah. Like you want to skewer them because of what they're doing to people who don't have a say.
I see. Okay. So when you just punched down on Pierre Poilievre, that was very unfair of you, wasn't it?
He doesn't have power anymore.
Oh, he still has power.
I know.
He's going to stick around. We don't know how long, but...
What do you think? What makes the best targets for your satire?
I think everything Claire said is great. I would also just add hypocrisy. When you have someone who is, standing on a soapbox, lecturing the rest of us, and then it comes out that, they're completely doing the opposite of what they said, and they're, the emperor has no clothes, et cetera, et cetera. That I think makes a great target. And the great thing about that is that spans across the political ideology. You don't have to be left or right to have that. We're all hypocrites, and politicians even more so.
How do you have enough material to work with? Because there's so little hypocrisy in politics these days,
You know what? Between politics and the media, somehow we scrape by.
Very good. Okay, you want to bring this up, Sheldon? We got to show this graphic here because your headlines are circulated on social media, and there's a bunch of them there. Poilievre rushed to safety after actual journalist question makes it past security. I get what the joke is there. Okay. Mark Carney questions why struggling young Canadians not setting up offshore tax havens. That's a good one. We tried to write a debate analysis, but Jagmeet Singh kept interrupting us. I think I'm aware of what that's a reference to. Yeah. Green Party threatens to keep adding co-leaders until they are allowed to participate in debates again.
I will say that one was mine.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's very funny, kids. All right, so let's follow up. What makes for a good headline, Claire?
I think it immediately gets the point of view of the writer across. Because I think a lot of times people don't read the actual article. And so it has to be snappy, it has to be punchy, it has to be like, I know what this is going to be about. And then you lure people in with the headline, and then you hope that they read your jokes that you've lovingly crafted in the article itself. But yeah, it's just like, what's the target? What's a funny little joke that you can throw in? What's, the comedy math of it all? And then you just put it out there and hope that people go for it.
Well, that's what I want to find out about now. Luke, when you put it out there, I want to know if you hear back from the actual people you're skewering in one of two ways. Do they get back to you and say, that was really funny, good shot? Or do they get back to you and say, That made me cry. You're so not nice, you people.
We usually hear from, when we're talking about powerful people, it's usually not them directly. It's usually like an underling who's like, hey, we really laughed at that in the office. But, we didn't want to tell the boss about it. So we've heard from, like Trudeau's people that every once in a while he's gotten a chuckle out of ours and also been pissed off at ours from time to time. Excuse my language. We've definitely heard, my favorite story is that one of the things that kind of launched us from like I said, a completely unknown entity to a somewhat known entity was we wrote a viral article about Chris Hadfield coming back when he came back from space because he'd been tweeting and posting videos to this like massive Rogers data bill for a roaming bill. So we thought, oh, funny little joke. It went viral around the world and a lot of people thought it was real. And so we heard from not his social media team, his PR people that everywhere for a year or two, everywhere he went after that, people would come up to him and say like, I'm so sorry about that phone bill, man. So he took that in great spirits. Chris Hadfield was the best. So he wasn't mad about it at all, but I do regret the inconvenience we caused, even though it was very important to us to have that kind of success. But yeah, so there's been fun elements. And then of course there's, some lawsuit threats here and there too.
Is that right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Really? People,
Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be funny.
It's always just businesses because businesses have no sense of humor as entities. So it's never anything that's gone anywhere. So it's fun to laugh about. But yeah, there's definitely been ones where people are like, we're going to sue you. And I go, all right. And then they don't.
They love to kind of just go slander, libel, all that kind of stuff and throw those words out as if we're going to be intimidated by it. And I'm like, do you know how many people at the Beaverton are also lawyers?
You guys aren't lawyers.
I am.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah.
You are a lawyer.
I know.
So you are actually able to say to them, excuse me, I know a little bit about the law and you don't worry me too much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't practice anymore, really, but back in the day I was a litigation lawyer, so it was always fun to be like, all right, you can contact me at this law firm and serve your statement of claim anytime. I'll accept on behalf of the company. And yeah, people tend to shrink a little bit when they hear that.
Right. Claire, the world is a very unhappy place these days.
Yes.
So in some respects, we need you more than ever because there's so much, death, destruction, and misery all over the place. And I wonder how or whether that makes your job more difficult and whether you ever have those moments where you think, this just may cross the line because it's just, it's too much.
I think you're right. There's a lot going on to be sad about. Yeah. And I don't think it makes my job harder. I think it makes it more important. I think art is more important than ever. I think comedy is more important than ever. If anything, it galvanizes me to write more, to create more. Because like I said, if I can give someone a laugh, sometimes that's all that matters. I think satire is very important. It can serve a lot of purposes, but sometimes you just need a laugh in your day when the world is on fire. So I mean, that's basically how I feel about it.
Is anything off limits?
No.
No.
Nothing's off limits?
No. There's just things that you have to be considerate about more than others. If you're going to make a joke about Tim Hortons food sucking, not that big a deal. If you're going to make a joke about something really tragic or tumultuous in the world, you have to think about it a lot more and you have to have more eyes on it to make sure you're, as Claire said, punching up, not punching down and walking the right path. But there's no subject that's off limits.
I always kind of look at it as like, I agree. I don't think anything's ever off limits. It's just sometimes I have to ask myself, am I the right person to make this joke? I think that's always it. You can make jokes about everything. It's just who gets to make the joke and why.
I'm going to push back a little on that. Like the Russia-Ukraine war, you guys would go there?
Of course.
Yes.
I mean, we can't make fun of Putin.
Yeah.
That's too harsh. I'm not going to make fun of innocent Ukrainians being bombed by Russia, but we can't make fun of Putin. I mean, there's absurdities in everything. I mean, there's so many great dark comedies about war. I mean, yes, there's tragedies too, but there's great comedies. I mean, Catch-22 is one of the funniest books ever written, and it's about the absurdity of the military and the absurdity of war. So, there's comedy in everything. It's just, and sometimes the darkest subject matter makes the best comedy.
I was watching Blackadder the other day, and I'm like, this is a satire of war as well, and
100%.
It's dark as heck. But like, yeah, absolutely. It's just who do you punch up? Let's talk about Putin. Let's talk about his actions. Let's talk about who is funding that war. That's who we attack.
Do you try to be nonpartisan?
No. No, I don't think that's helpful. I think, especially with the Beaverton, I think we skewer everybody.
So then you are in some respects.
Yeah, but I think each individual headline has its own bias. I think comedy without a point of view is boring. I think art without a point of view is boring. And so I don't think we can come at political topics from a completely neutral standpoint. I think you can try, but at the end of the day, there's satire comes from truth, and there's most of the time an objective truth about something.
So is that to say you will have one particular politician or party in your sightlines more than others? Is that fair to say?
I would say one party gives us more material to work with.
Okay.
But also, I
we know which
relish
one that is.
I'm not going to show my hand too early, but like, I think, but we're always more than happy to, God, we make fun of the liberals all the time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as you know, you read our headlines, and obviously we took on all the parties
You
there,
did.
except for the bloc, but, you know, that would probably not translate too well into French. But the issue with, you know, as Claire said, the issue with trying to be, you know, to use the Fox News term, fair and balanced, is that at the end of the day, you know, if you try and just like be everything to everyone, you're nothing to anyone. So we are who we are. We have a point of view, but I will say there are writers of the Beaverton who absolutely have a point of view that's far more right-wing than mine, that are, you know, conservative-leaning, and I don't stifle their point of view. As long as the joke's good, I'm for it. But my point of view, I'm never going to pretend that I'm, oh yeah, you know, I'm right in the middle. No, I'm a full lefty. So that's
you
who I
guys,
am.
you guys have a lot more fun skewering the conservatives than you do anybody else.
Absolutely.
That's fair to say.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and you don't apologize for that.
No. I don't see the point, you know, I'm not going to start writing headlines about, you know, making fun of trans people just to keep things fair and balanced on both ends. I don't see the point in that, and I think that does way more harm than good.
Well, that gets back to your punching up versus punching down.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. Okay. Why is there not, in which case, more sort of conservative-leaning satire in Canada? What do you think?
The Canadian conservatism has traditionally been something that defends institutions, that defends order, that defends, you know, peace, order, and good government, right? Like the old Toryism that dominated for so long until arguably recent years. And comedy defending institutions and defending order and defending, you know, the things we hold dear is inherently pretty weak. You can have comedy that's very edgy, that goes after the left, and I would argue that, as Claire was just saying, would often be punching down, but you do see it, and you're starting to see it more. I don't think there's any equivalent in Canada yet to like a Babylon Bee, which is a very right-wing satirical website in the United States that does what The Onion does, but from a Christian conservative perspective. But I don't think it would necessarily fail here. I think there is a market for that, and if someone wants to start it, they should feel free. I will not be doing that with my time, but that's just because that's not my point of view. But I don't think there's any reason it can't succeed. It's just that traditional conservatism in Canada, I don't think leads well to comedy, but the Polyev, edge of conservatism, I think comedy and memes and you know what Canada Proud does, for example, I think it is heading in that direction. So I wouldn't be shocked if you see something like that soon.
Yeah, I think, I just find, because like you said, I mean, we welcome conservative headlines, absolutely. Nobody is better at attacking the left than the left. And I think there's so much the conservatives, just on that point alone, could skewer the left for. But I find that so much of the time, conservative and right-wing, they're different, but they're sides of the same coin. Right-wing comedy tends to be more focused on attacking than actually making a solid point. Like you were talking about the Babylon Bee, they have two jokes. It's my pronouns are blank and I identify as blank.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. That doesn't, what are you trying
cute.
to say?
That's a cute line.
Yeah.
That's a cute line.
They've
Come
done
on.
6,000 articles.
Yeah, no, they just make the same two jokes over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we should do some, I'm not going to say serious analysis because I don't want that from you, but we should do some analysis about last night's
Darn
election. Now, I think, you know, obviously I was flipping around last night and caught a lot of the channels and saw all of their very serious, earnest analysis of what Canadians decided last night. I'm looking for a somewhat different take from the folks from the Beaverton. So, okay, Claire,
Yes.
as you were watching the returns come in last night,
Yes.
What was either intriguing, amusing, you?
Oh, okay. Well, I love the fact that they called the election pretty much 8 minutes after the polls closed. We were sitting there being like, oh man, it's going to be hours. We're not going to know. And they're just like, well, Liberals won. And we're like, oh God, okay, great. You know what I'm happy about? I'm happy that we're going to, you know, there's going to be a couple leadership changes, I think.
Do tell.
I mean, well, at least Jagmeet stepped down,
for sure.
Yeah.
and I am genuinely looking forward to seeing where that party goes, because it's just where it ended up is so sad from where it was even just a couple years ago.
You said a couple leadership changes.
Oh, well,
What's the second one?
I will be, okay, maybe
This is your fervent wish just coming to the surface here, as opposed to...
We're talking about Bernier, right? Everyone agrees.
I don't know. You know what? I won't maybe say change, but I will be curious as to see what happens with Polyev, because he clearly made a very defensive statement last night in his concession speech, and
Defensive?
I think so.
What do you mean defensive?
Well, it was very, it was nice that he said congratulations, Carney, but it was also just coming out and saying the exact same stuff that he's been saying this whole time. We're gonna fight. We're gonna fight. We're gonna make sure that we get all the criminals off the street. Just kind of his usual talking points.
I like that he ended with "Bring it home," which it's like
he did end with "Bring it home."
The home is gone. You left it on the curb. It ain't coming home.
Oh, you know, something I did find was funny is that he did he ended it with Canada first, Canada always, because I think probably somebody on his team told him, don't say Canada last, that's weird. Don't put Canada last.
But he did sort of plant the flag to suggest that I'm not going anywhere. I want to. This fight's going to take a long time, and I intend to stick around.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what happens with the leadership review with him.
Okay. What did you, as you were watching the returns last night, what stuck out for you?
I mean, I forget that this is going to happen every election, but I'm always led by it. During that 2-hour window where like polls are closed on the East Coast and everything's about to close across the country except for BC, but all we have to talk about is the East Coast, and like there'd be like 5 votes in from Miramichi, and everyone's like, what does this mean? And it's like, I don't know.
Oh my God.
The McIsaac family voted. Like, that's what it means. Like, it was just like, it's one of those things where like every time we overreact so extremely to the East Coast polls. And then I love, again, at the end of the night, they go back to, the election analysis guy at the board, and he's like, oh yeah, all those East Coast races we thought were swinging, they went exactly how they always go. And there was no change in the East Coast at all. And we're like, yep, we spent 2 hours just painstakingly breaking down like house by house how people are voting because we don't have any results anywhere else to talk about. And every time it's just like, oh yeah, that didn't mean anything. We just spent 2 hours talking about it. Have fun.
But the East Coast gets represented
real
hard for 2 hours.
It's their time to shine, for sure.
Yes, indeed, yes. Now, of course, with the American comedy shows and comedy and satirical press, on the one hand, they were mortified when Donald Trump won, but on the other hand, they thought, this is comedy gold. We've got 4 years of fabulous nuttiness to write about. And I don't know if you have that now. I mean, do you know whether Mark Carney is a particularly funny guy who's going to be, a joy to skewer for the next however long this lasts?
I think we find joy in skewering everybody, but to be perfectly honest, in this political climate, somebody boring right now, I think is what we need. Let's make fun of the fact that he's boring. Like, that's fine with me. But I think I would push back just a bit on the idea that people on comedy shows like The Daily Show, John Oliver, like a lot of them say, we don't want to talk about Trump anymore. Like when Trump got elected, people are like, oh man, this is so good for you. This is so great for comedy. And they're like, if I have to write one more article
enough is enough
about Donald Trump, I'm going to lose my mind, which is kind of how I feel about Polyev. I'm just like, I don't want, or Doug Ford especially, I don't want to write these. I want them gone. I want boring politics that takes care of people, that watches out for its most vulnerable citizens. We will always have things to skew.
Are you sure you worked with the Beaverton? That was like a responsible thing you just said.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
This is where I rip off my mask.
Reveal yourself as a respectable journalist.
Yeah, you're actually Campbell Clark from the Globe and Mail. Oh, strange.
Oh, no.
That's right. Last 30 seconds to you.
In terms of worrying about Carney, I think there is a phrase in satire that is bad for the world, good for us. So the worst things can be good for satire writers because people want, if you're not laughing, you're crying. So there's subject matter when it's bad for the world and we can make people laugh about it. That is very good for, traffic and all those things. Carney is, I would say, the definition of a blank sheet right now. We elected him because he wasn't Trudeau and because he wasn't Polyev and because he wasn't Trump. And we're going to find out who he is as he's our prime minister. And that's going to be fascinating. And we're going to, have a lot of fun making fun of that as we go.
I bet you are. I look forward to reading it. Luke Gordon-Field, Claire Blackwood, happy 15th anniversary to you two and the Beaverton. Thanks for coming in tonight. Dave Thomas has spent decades making people all over laugh. On SCTV, as one of the Mackenzie brothers, and in innumerable other movies and television shows. But his next big mission is anything but humorous. Tomorrow, Dave will travel to Ukraine in hopes of shedding some light on the plight of its people who have endured 3 years of Vladimir Putin's immoral and illegal war. And Dave Thomas joins us now from Los Angeles, California, with more. It is great to see you again, Dave. You and I are both from the same hometown. Our parents knew each other, so let's get all that on the surface before we start. And tell me why you are going to Ukraine.
Well, I have a friend named Andy Bain who I partnered with in an animation company in Los Angeles back in 2001. Andy was a very savvy MBA student who went over to the Ukraine and purchased a couple of businesses when the Soviet Union dissolved. And one of them was an animation company. And our plan was to outsource to the animation company. And so over the course of the decade and a half that I worked with Andy, I got to know the Ukrainian people that we were working with, the artists, very talented people and storytellers. And it was a great collaboration. Well, then the war started, and Andy stayed in the Ukraine, and our company, our animation company, fell apart because of the war. And then Andy called me about, I don't know, 10 days ago and told me that he had formed this charity called the Ukrainian Freedom Fund, and it's on the online. You can get it UFF, theuff.org. And he wanted to help the Ukrainians in their struggle against the Russians. And he has a military background, so he had connections, and he was able to pull some resources together, get some favors and things like that. But ultimately, he needed money, and he asked me if I would come and help him raise awareness for his charity, because he said, you got a profile in Canada. Maybe we can get Canadian donors to help us out here. Here's the kind of stuff they're doing. They're obviously providing food and medical and all those kind of resources to the victims and civilian casualties of the war, but they're also providing food and medical aid to the soldiers. They're evacuating old people and children from the front lines. They have technical people with electronic expertise who are helping defuse unexploded ordnance that's in the rubble of apartment buildings. They're working with Canadian military advisors to help bring the Ukrainians up to speed with the sort of modern electronic warfare that the Russians are waging.
Are you not concerned about yourself going over there?
Well, okay, two things. I'm playing with the casino's money. I'm 76. So I've had a damn good run and I'm a happy guy. But I'm going to be well protected, and I think I'm going to be fine. Andy said it's a very strange dichotomy that the city of Kyiv during the day looks like, a beautiful modern city with, outdoor cafes, and that there's no war at all going on. And then at night, the air raid sirens go off and the rockets begin to fire. So, there's a good side to it and a safe side to it, and another side where you have to be cautious. And Andy has all the resources to help protect me. So I think I'm going to be fine. But, I am going to go up to Dnipro, D-N-I-P-R-O, which is on the front lines, because one of the things I wanted to do was to ask the Ukrainians that I interviewed if they could still laugh, if there was anything in their lives that gave them a release from the tension of the war that they could laugh at. Well, as it turns out, they can, and the laughter is more important to them than ever.
How long are you going over for?
About 10 days, maybe a little more. I want to talk to the people. I want to find out how the war is affecting them. It's uprooted them. A lot of them are refugees. They've moved away from their towns that have been bombed. Their children's school has been interrupted. They've lost relatives in the conflict. And, this is the biggest war in Europe since World War II. And I don't think it's getting as much attention as it should, But I'm not there. I'm not going to be getting into the politics of it, because that's not me. That's not my job. I don't have any skill set there or any real right to talk about that. But I do think I have a right to talk about the people. And I do think I have a right to talk about the human suffering.
You know, I hope you'll permit this observation, and I do wonder whether you have felt it yourself. Back in the day, you got very famous doing the best impression anyone ever did of Bob Hope. And of course, one of the reasons Bob Hope got very famous was that he used to go overseas and entertain the troops on behalf of the United States. Has it occurred to you that you're kind of taking a chapter out of Bob Hope's playbook here?
Well, I'm not standing in front of the Ukrainians and doing a Canadian monologue.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? There was a part of Bob, I remember he did a show in China, and he had an interpreter interpreting his monologue, and it was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. But, you know, so I'm not going to be doing that. But I do want to find what the comedy connection might be just on a personal level, because I'm very interested in that because of my background. And but, you know, Steve, this is a story that, you know, that's personal. And for me, it's at this stage of my life, you know, I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to do something that feels real, you know, something that I think is necessary, and that, I don't know, maybe this will inspire other people to do stuff to try to raise money and to help the Ukrainians. Because, you know, we're living in a really crazy world right now. And I'm not ever really sure whether I think it's crazy just because I'm an old guy and old people always think the world is crazy, or whether it really is crazy. But I've talked to people who say, no, Dave, it really is crazy. It's crazier than ever.
They are right. It really is crazier. Dave, do you mind if we check in with you when you are over in Ukraine? And I don't know if we can get a line out of there, but if we try, can we talk to you when you're there?
I would love that. And you know, they have resources.
Okay.
Andy's got resources that will probably allow that to happen. So if I can be on the street talking to people, or at a stand-up club on the front lines, or talking to soldiers or something, I'd be happy to find a way to link that up with you guys. That'd be
Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on TVO. Next time you talk to your brother Ian, tell him I love the concert of his that I went to in Oshawa not too long ago. He still sounds angelic, wonderful voice, and of course I love his songs. And you be well over there, okay, my friend, and we'll touch base soon.
Thanks a lot.
And that is the agenda for Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Tomorrow on the program, can the new Canadian government work with Mexico in our trade war with the U.S.? We'll explore that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.